Hermann Graf was one of the most successful fighter pilots of the Second World War, and one of the highest-scoring aces in aviation history. He was born on October 24, 1912, in the town of Engen in southern Germany. He grew up in a rural area near Lake Constance, where he developed a strong love for physical activity and competition. As a young man, he was especially interested in athletics and skiing, and he became known for his determination and discipline. These traits would later shape both his military career and his personal life. Graf's early adulthood was shaped by the difficult economic conditions in Germany after the First World War. Jobs were scarce and opportunities were limited. Like many young men of his generation, he was attracted to aviation, which represented modern technology, adventure, and prestige. He joined the German Air Sports Association, which provided basic flight training under the guise of civilian flying, as Germany was still restricted by the Treaty of Versailles. This early experience gave Graf a foundation in flying skills, though he was not immediately accepted into military pilot training. In 1936, Graf was conscripted into the German army rather than the Air Force, much to his disappointment. He served as an infantryman and later transferred to anti-aircraft units. During this period, he repeatedly applied for pilot training but was rejected due to what were considered insufficient academic qualifications. Graf did not give up. He continued to pursue flying in his spare time and worked hard to prove his physical and technical abilities. His persistence eventually paid off, and in 1938, he was finally accepted into the Luftwaffe as a pilot trainee. Graf completed his flight training just as Europe was moving toward war. When the Second World War began in September 1939, he was still gaining experience and was not immediately assigned to combat duties. His first operational postings were relatively uneventful, and he saw little action during the early campaigns. This lack of early success frustrated him, but it also gave him time to refine his flying skills and learn from more experienced pilots. His fortunes changed dramatically in 1941 when he was assigned to Jagdgeschwader 52, a fighter wing that would become legendary for producing some of the highest-scoring aces of the war. When Germany launched Operation Barbarossa, the invasion of the Soviet Union, Graf was deployed to the Eastern Front. It was here that his career truly took off. The air war in the East was intense, chaotic, and deadly, but it also provided opportunities for skilled pilots to achieve high victory totals. Graf quickly proved himself as an exceptional fighter pilot. He was aggressive but calculated, with excellent situational awareness and marksmanship. He learned to exploit the strengths of his Messerschmitt Bf 109 while taking advantage of weaknesses in Soviet aircraft and pilot training, especially during the early stages of the campaign. His victory count began to rise steadily, and by the end of 1941, he had already achieved ace status. In 1942, Graf's success accelerated at an astonishing pace. He developed a reputation for consistency and endurance, often flying multiple combat missions in a single day. He carefully studied enemy tactics and adapted his own methods to maximize effectiveness while minimizing risk. Unlike some pilots who relied on reckless attacks, Graf focused on positioning, surprise, and precise shooting. His ability to remain calm under pressure allowed him to survive countless engagements. That year, Graf achieved several remarkable milestones. He became the first pilot in history to score 200 aerial victories, a feat that stunned both allies and enemies. His achievements were heavily publicized by German propaganda, and he was celebrated as a national hero. Despite the attention, Graf remained focused on his duties. Though the pressure of fame and expectation weighed on him, he was aware that his survival depended not only on skill, but also on discipline and restraint. Graf's relationship with his fellow pilots was generally positive. He was respected for his experience and knowledge, and often shared advice with younger airmen. He was not known as a flashy or charismatic leader, but rather as a serious professional who led by example. His emphasis on physical fitness and mental focus set a standard within his unit. However, the constant strain of combat and the loss of friends took a toll on him emotionally. In September 1942, Graf was shot down and captured by Soviet forces after his aircraft was damaged during combat. His capture was a major blow to German morale, as he was one of the Luftwaffe's most prominent aces. Graf spent time as a prisoner of war under harsh conditions. During his captivity, he fell seriously ill, reportedly suffering from malnutrition and other health problems. His physical condition deteriorated rapidly, and there were fears that he might not survive. In an unusual turn of events, Graf was eventually released from Soviet captivity in 1944. The reasons for his release remain somewhat unclear, but it is believed that his poor health and his value as a propaganda figure played a role. When he returned to Germany, he was no longer fit for frontline combat. Nevertheless, he was reinstated into the Luftwaffe and given a leadership and training role. As the war situation worsened for Germany, Graf was assigned to command Jagdgeschwader 52, the same unit in which he had achieved his greatest successes. By this stage of the war, fuel shortages, inexperienced pilots, and overwhelming Allied air superiority made effective operations increasingly difficult. Graf struggled with the responsibility of leading a unit under such conditions, and he reportedly clashed with higher command over tactics and priorities. His insistence on preserving pilots rather than sacrificing them in hopeless situations was not always well received. Toward the end of the war, Graf was involved in controversial efforts to revive morale and discipline within the Luftwaffe. He was associated with attempts to reorganize fighter units and enforce stricter standards, though the overall impact of these efforts was limited. The collapse of Nazi Germany in 1945 brought an end to his military career and marked the beginning of a difficult post-war period. After the war, Graf spent several years in Allied captivity. Like many former Luftwaffe officers, he faced interrogation and uncertainty about his future. He was eventually released and returned to civilian life in a defeated and divided Germany. Adjusting to post-war society was challenging. The skills and fame he had gained during the war did not easily translate into a stable civilian career. Graf initially struggled to find his place in the new Germany. He worked in various jobs, including as a laborer, and later in the aviation industry in non-flying roles. Over time, he became involved in veterans organizations and contributed to discussions about aviation history and military experiences. He remained proud of his achievements as a pilot, but generally avoided political statements or attempts to glorify the war. In his later years, Graf lived a relatively quiet life. He maintained contact with former comrades and participated in reunions and commemorative events related to aviation. He was aware that his legacy was complex, shaped by extraordinary personal skill, but also by his service to a regime responsible for immense destruction and suffering. This awareness seemed to bring a degree of reflection and restraint in how he spoke about the past. Hermann Graf died on November 4, 1988. At the age of 76, he left behind a record of 212 confirmed aerial victories, making him one of the highest-scoring fighter aces in history. His career remains a subject of study for historians and aviation enthusiasts, not only because of the sheer number of his successes, but also because of what it reveals about the nature of air combat on the Eastern Front. Graf's life illustrates the combination of talent, persistence, and circumstance that defined many wartime careers. He was not born into privilege or destined for fame, but through determination and skill, he rose to the very top of his profession. At the same time, his story serves as a reminder that individual achievement cannot be separated from the broader context of the war in which it occurred. His legacy is one of technical excellence and human endurance, set against one of the darkest periods in modern history.